See, I get tired of college football running scared from the NFL, but I can't do anything about that because I'm not the commissioner of this sport yet. However, when we tell the NFL we need a little time on Thursday night and they say, no, Chiefs-Ravens will go off as scheduled, well, what do? We flex in a way that only we could. Update from the National Weather Service. Chiefs-Ravens and a weather delay. Hate it for you guys. We're live as live can be. It's Thursday night, September 5th, the year of our Lord 2024, jam-packed, high atop a stunning downtown Nashville, Tennessee, and proudly, this side, presented by Academy Sports and Outdoors. We nailed just about every upset in the country last week, so paper pop early here, upset alert meter. It's peaking again for a few of you. I will talk about that. I got a problem happening down in Tallahassee, and it's not the 0-2 start to FSU season. It's something else that should never be an issue for FSU, but it is. We've got the Billy Napier stuff as well, so I'm going to make a stop in the Sunshine State tonight. Cubelic is in an airport somewhere, and allegedly, I mean, my phone's going off as we speak, allegedly, we will get him on the show in like 30 minutes because I have a few bones to pick with him. We'll see. It's up to the FAA at this point if Cubelic joins the show. If not, I'll probably just look at the live chat for a little while, but we do have a jam-packed show tonight. Morton, Illinois is tuned in. El Paso, Texas, Meridianville, Alabama, Omaha, Nebraska, this time tomorrow night. I won't be in Ann Arbor. I'll be in Detroit, but it's not a long drive. But I will be in a hotel room somewhere. I will be sending out on Twitter and Instagram an alert for you that Friday Night Lions is imminent. It'll be, sometime later tomorrow night. You got to be following on Instagram Live. That's the only platform I do that on. I've got my reasons. It's still Late Kick Josh over there, by the way. Name change pending. It's still Late Kick Josh, so make sure you're following on Instagram because that is a very, very fun thing we do on Friday nights. All right, let us dive into the show. Now, this time last week, we've had like 9 or 10,000 new subs to the channel this week, so a lot of you may not have watched the show. This time last week and on every Thursday show, I lead it with upset alerts, but I don't typically do, hey, I think so-and-so is going to win outright, although last week we did. I do my overall concern level. So, for example, like we're going to lead with NC State, Tennessee in a second. How concerned am I about Tennessee? So, Colin, here's a good endpoint for you. Upset alert meter. How concerned am I about some of these favorites? NC State plays Tennessee. This is in Charlotte, so it's a neutral site game. I expect Tennessee to be well represented here, according to our sources inside the secondary ticket market world. Tennessee about a 9.5-point favorite right now at FanDuel. All right, I am thinking to myself as I'm walking around Centennial Park today in Nashville, getting a mild sunburn in the process, I'm thinking, I love Tennessee this week. That's my chest I'm patting. I love Tennessee this week. But how would it go wrong if it went wrong? How concerned am I? Well, I'm about a 6 on the concern meter because I walked around that park today and I worked up a scenario in my head where NC State doesn't just cover, NC State wins outright. I've got a ton of respect for Tony Gibson. I've got a ton of respect for the NC State defensive support staff. We've got them really, really highly graded. I talked to you about that last week. I talked to you about that Tuesday night. Josh Heupel is one of the top 5 OCs in the country. Tony Gibson's way up there on the defensive side. These two support staffs going against each other, it's big league stuff, and I want you to think about where Nico Iamaleava falls in all this. So he's not becoming a star. To me, he's a star right now, but he's still young. He's still green. He hasn't started a lot of games. So sometimes you and I watch a guy go off, and we think in highlight terms, and we think this guy looks invincible, but that's not always what opposing defensive coaches see on film. So I view this NC State defensive staff as about as equipped as any staff they're going to face outside of like Georgia, a little bit down the road, of being able to expose potential flaws in Nico's game. Now, it may be that they're wrong and they think they've got something and it's not there. But what do you do against young guys? The young quarterbacks out there, the ones who are lighting up the stat sheet. One of the first things you got to find out about these dudes is how well do they stand up against pressure? And so NC State, fairly aggressive defensively anyway, just their overall profile is that I really expect them to be aggressive. Now, the trade-off there, and the reason everyone doesn't do it every down, is because you can get burned doing that. But I think NC State has to do that. It's a massive moment for the program, too. It is a massive moment. This is a game for Tennessee. It's the game for NC State. So if you get him rattled early, and that Tennessee run game is not just boom, 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 the way Josh Heupel wants it to, Then you start asking, well, okay, at that point, we start to ask, what's the weakness over on Tennessee's side of things? And perceptionally, it's the secondary, which coincides and it meshes very well with the moves that NC State made in the portal and probably the overall strength of that offense and a veteran quarterback in Grayson McCall throwing to him, and that's the wide receiver core. If they can start to tilt the game in their favor, they wouldn't be totally uncomfortable in a track meet, but if they can tilt the game in their favor, there is a world, regret it though I might, there is a world where NC State wins this game outright. There's a reason this number's not 17 or 18. It's 9.5. Now, it's gone up this week. I like Tennessee, but I've got a 6 on the concern meter for upset. Moving along, a game I'll be at. Yes, Colin, the whole new Saturday tour will be taking ourselves up to Ann Arbor, as is everyone else this weekend. There's the beautiful graphic. We are proudly fueled on the road by our friends at Quick Trip. Texas is still a 7.5-point favorite in this game over at FanDuel. You notice how many 7.5s there are floating out there? Producer Jesse and I were looking at this earlier today. So Tennessee was a 7.5 favorite. They've bumped up to 9.5. But Texas over Michigan, 7.5. We're going to do Oklahoma State, Arkansas a little bit later. Oklahoma State, 7.5. Jesse, what are the other two we looked at? There were a couple other 7.5s out there. So there are a lot of these names, or a lot of these, Nebraska, Colorado, 7.5. So there are a lot of these 7.5 just kind of floating out there, consensus across the market. And I know that your instinct is telling you that number looks low, but history is saying if it looks too low, if it looks too good to be true, you know the rest there. Is this too good to be true? I cannot think off the top of my head of a single person I've heard outside Michigan fandom pick Michigan to win this game this week. I've heard very few people pick them to cover. That includes me. I took Texas to win. I took Texas to cover. I think Texas matches up very well with Michigan. I think Michigan's going to struggle to score, which is not surprising, but that means they just turn it into a fist fight. But where I differ from a lot of folks is I think Texas ought to be well equipped to win that way as well. I think Texas has built themselves to do that. You get enamored with the flash and the sizzle, and there should be a whole lot of confidence in that outfit that they can win a physical game. But if they didn't, how would it happen? And what is my concern level here? My concern level is only a 5. I feel good about Texas, but if Texas can't run the ball well, and Michigan's been known to do that, then the Texas offense has to rely on Quinn Ewers and a really deep stable of pass catchers. And the thing about that is, I've stood on the sideline 3 years in a row and watched Ohio State try the same thing against this Michigan defense, and it's failed 3 times in a row. And that, in some cases, unstoppable-looking offense got stopped 3 years in a row. So there's a world where Michigan does that. Here's the difference. Those Michigan teams were more offensively efficient than I think this Michigan team will be, which is where my concern level goes down. I could certainly see Texas getting their nose bloodied. I could see Texas maybe disappointing me a little bit and not being able to match the physicality. What I have trouble seeing is Michigan scoring enough to make it matter when they give themselves the opportunity. If I'm wrong there, I'm wrong there. But that's why my concern level is a little bit lower. And like I said, the most fascinating thing to me in this game is, number one, can Michigan score offensively? Defensive scores you can't predict. They're really good at it, but no one has a model that predicts that. But the second part is, if it's 7-3 midway through the second quarter, you know Michigan has gotten the game out into the deeper water where they want it. So then can they score enough? But the other thing is, does Texas look uncomfortable there? The implied total in this game, Texas by about a touchdown, and the total in the low 40s is like a 25-17 final. That's the implied total from the odds makers, which means if this thing's played in the upper teens, low 20s, Michigan feels okay. I just think Texas should as well. Maybe I'm wrong there. Kansas State is on the road. Do you know this? If you're a Wildcat fan, do you know where your team is a couple of nights from now? Well, it's an early game, but they're at Tulane. Kansas State's a 9.5-point favorite at FanDuel right now at Tulane. It's a noon kickoff Eastern time, so it's 11 a.m. local time kick there in New Orleans. Kansas State did lose 3 games on the road last year. I'm going to say against better competition, but Tulane is not a bad team. Tulane's been one of the best G5 outfits for a while, and they got John Summerall from Troy. Now, you may not know who Summerall is right now. You will all due respect to Tulane, because he'll be coaching a major Power 4 program in the very near future. If you want to buy stock in one of these guys, John Summerall is the guy. There is a big points per game differential gap for Kansas State in home games versus road games. It's always harder to play in college football on the road, so a lot of teams have that in common. It may be just a tick more glaring for Kansas State, and a lot of that's situational too. Sometimes it just so happens that you play better teams on the road, because this is just over a couple of years stretch. Tulane is good enough talent-wise to hang here. They are. This coaching staff's very good. It's a very underrated coaching staff because no one knows anything about them. These G5 coaches who are ascending, their profile is ascending, they always circle these moments because they know they don't get a lot of them. And it's always, fair or not, the games they're judged on. And they're like inferior from a talent profile standpoint, so they got to punch above their weight. But Tulane has a 2-day rest advantage here as well. It doesn't matter as much early in the season, but we do pay attention to it. My concern level here is a 6. I respect that team that much. My concern level is a 6 for Kansas State, favored by 9.5. Now, the next game, we have placed money on. App State at Clemson. This line has come down since we bet it. We got it at App State plus 17.5. They are now a 17-point dog on the road at Clemson. Now, listen, I'm not calling for the outright. So my concern level, albeit a 4, is not as high as some of these other games. Clemson's favored for a reason. It's a night game there. It's what we would call a get-right game, but I'm terrified to say that after what Florida State had happen to him the other night. So if this were to be a really close game in the fourth quarter, it would just be because Clemson's offense has done more of the same, and that is be really, really mediocre at best. Now, Cade Klubnik's been a lot better quarterback at home than on the road. A lot of college quarterbacks have that said about him. Again, like I said with Kansas State, it's just a little bit more glaring with the Clemson quarterback here. Low-scoring game, if we get one, provides a ton of variance. That means every possession matters more. That means every turnover gets magnified. Joey Aguilar is about a 300-yard per game passer for App State. Look, there is a world where we watch this game and we end up saying, I think App State had the better quarterback. Klubnik's just been a disappointment. The Clemson offense, for a while now, has been a disappointment. And if it happens again, App State can hang with them. Beating them would be a tall task, but they can hang with them. This is the same quarterback that I sat right there in Austin International Airport last year and watched beat Texas A&M. It's the same one. A lot of these pieces on this App State team went to Kyle Field last year, and you may say, well, big deal. I mean, that was Jimbo on his way out. That was a Texas A&M team. Okay. If you think 2024 Clemson's better than 2023 A&M, okay, I do too. That's great. For broad strokes purposes, there is a big game profile about this App State program, not because of the Michigan win 15 decades ago, but because there are players on this team that have gone on the road and drawn blood from a major Power 5 opponent. Sometimes when you get that in your DNA, it doesn't really leave, and you're more comfortable in the moment. So my concern level's a 4, but I think it bears close watching, and we love App State plus the points. Now, the last one we have not talked about all week, but I will hit right now. Kansas is thought to be one of the contenders in the Big 12, which they are. They're on the road at Illinois. Haven't heard anyone, maybe short of Tom Fornelli, talk about this game all week, and I just assume Fornelli did. Kansas is favored by 5.5 at FanDuel right now. My concern level is a 7. I think Illinois can pull this off. I think we may have been a year too early on Illinois. It was kind of trendy to buy into them last year, and I think a lot of folks may have been just a year too early. Luke Altmaier in his last 4 games, 70% completion guy, 11-2 touchdown to interception ratio. Illinois defense last week, albeit against pretty inferior competition, forced either a 3-and-out or a turnover on every possession in the first half. And it is a brand new year with a lot of new pieces for Kansas. There is a very distinct possibility that Kansas is on its way to becoming, for all we know, a Big 10 champion or Big 12 championship contender. But in that world, there exists a scenario where they are not yet what they will become, because it's college football, because this is a developmental program, and therefore it's not just blindly reloading like it would be at Georgia or Ohio State or what have you. So my concern level is a 7 here. I think there's a very, very real possibility that Illinois is in this thing at the end, which is implied in the point spread. I think they can win the thing outright. So those are some of the upset alert concern meters I have. Jesse, every game that we covered in that segment last week, the underdog either covered or won outright, correct? Correct. Okay, so we did 6 of them last week. We just did 5 of them. Let's see how that turns out. Academy Sports and Outdoors, point blank, you need to stop there if you're going tailgating this weekend. You need to stop there if you need a baseball bat for the little one who's about to take his first swings in T-ball. You need to go there. I can't guarantee you they have Halloween decorations, but it wouldn't surprise me. But fall sports, back to school stuff, the weather's about to change. Do you know that it was in the mid-80s here today? I have it on good authority. It was in the upper 70s in Ann Arbor today. It's going to be in like the mid-50s for the game this Saturday. It's going to be in the 40s in the morning when Uncle Dennis Dodd and I have to go out there in the big house for our live hits in the morning. Cold is what we would call that where I'm from, cold, which means I got to go, like in real terms, I have to go to Academy at some point tomorrow and gear up as I usually do for fall. I just didn't want to do that in early September, but that's what happens when you head up to Big Ten country. Does this qualify, by the way, as a Southern team going to play in cold weather? Does it qualify in mid-50s? Does that qualify? No, it doesn't qualify. I just wanted to make you laugh. Here's what qualifies. Academy Sports and Outdoors. Whatever you need. Tailgating, back to school, back to sports. Academy.com. If you can't get there in person, they make the show free, and we eternally appreciate them for that. For the second year in a row, I had something copied and pasted to put in the live chat, and I whiffed on it. Academy Sports will not whiff on you. We appreciate them. Always have, always will. Okay, I need to type something right quick, and it looks like this. Subscribe. So the other day I told you guys, a lot of you think you're subscribed and you're not. I got flooded. My inbox got flooded. And a lot of you said you've been watching for years and you're ashamed to admit you found out you weren't subscribed. I told you. I think Big Tech's out to get us. So don't let Big Tech win. Just check and make sure you're subscribed. It's free. It doesn't cost anything. It just helps us. So the streets have been talking in college football, and I have put my ear to the streets, and the streets have been saying something like this. The Big Ten may have caught the SEC. The Big Ten may be better than the SEC this year. And I know why the streets are saying such things, because I watched the same thing you guys did. I watched USC mildly upset LSU the other night. Great game, by the way. It was a game so good, I texted Colin. I said, I know we're not in the studio. I know it's late Sunday night. I'm just going to throw on a random orange shirt and film about a 10-minute reaction video. Can you upload it? Can you make me a thumbnail? Yes, and he got it up. Immunity. Great game. And so that makes you wonder, LSU, SEC, USC, Big Ten as of 5 minutes ago. And then you watch Penn State against West Virginia, and Penn State and Drew Aller all of a sudden look better than many expected them to look. Not necessarily the JP poll, but many did not have Penn State as high as the JP poll. So then we can't just stop there. We got to continue, right? And we got to irresponsibly just train headlong down this path of overreaction, and I encourage that. And that is the Big Ten better than the SEC? Now, I was willing to not talk about this tonight, but enough of you asked about it. Enough of you flat out said it, just defiantly said you believe this, that I said, well, I don't believe it yet, so I will put my numbers where my mouth is. How do you measure conference strength? The answer is not bowl results. The answer is not head-to-head. That is not how you measure conference strength because it is not equally seeded. There is no world where it's perfectly measured because there is no world where I take the top 10 teams in the SEC and the top 10 teams in the Big Ten and have number one play number one and 2 versus 2 and 3 versus 3 and see what the head-to-head result is. That would be a great opening weekend of college football, and when I'm commissioner, I may push for it, but we don't have that. The best I can do for you is I can tell you I ran through the model, the 10 teams. I went over to FanDuel, and I saw which teams in order they had to win the national title. And we took that as their implied power ratings in the conferences. So we stacked the SEC number 1 through 10 and the Big Ten number 1 through 10. And I'm going to tell you right now, so if we stack these conferences up, if we stack the SEC and the Big Ten up right now, I ran every one of these matchups through the model. I'm going to tell you what our numbers would say, but then I'm going to tell you what straight-up FanDuel Sportsbook would say about these games too. Georgia versus Ohio State. Georgia minus 4.5. Texas would be about a 3-point favorite against Oregon. Bama, field goal favorite against Penn State. Got Ole Miss minus 4 against Michigan. Tennessee minus 1 against USC, the model is really high on USC. LSU about a field goal over Iowa. Missouri by a touchdown over Wisconsin. A&M -9 against Washington. Oklahoma -10.5 against Maryland. And Auburn -5.5 against Rutgers. The moral of the story there is in all 10 equally seeded matchups, the model would favor the SEC team, which of course just draws cries of SEC bias and SEC favoritism, because that's certainly what we're trying to do with this thing. We're not trying to make money betting on this stuff. We're just trying to favor a conference. Makes all the sense in the world. Anyway, since I know that logic does not enter this equation much, I hit up the people who actually do put numbers up that the market can bet on. We hit our partners up at FanDuel, and as part of our partnership, I just get to ask them any question or any hypothetical at any time. So I gave them these 10 matchups, and I asked our folks over at FanDuel, give me the hypothetical number on every one of these games. And friends, I have now had Director Colin put up a new graphic, and he has highlighted everywhere that FanDuel disagrees with our model. And you'll notice nothing changed on the screen, because FanDuel Sportsbook in these 10 hypothetical matchups would also either favor the SEC or would have a pick'em. There was one game, Texas versus Oregon, according to FanDuel on a neutral site, would be a pick'em game right now. Every other game, all 9 of them, they would favor the SEC team. This doesn't mean anything because the games didn't actually happen. All I'm trying to illustrate for you is the Big Ten's a very solid conference, very solid. Clearly the number 2 conference in the country. Haven't quite surpassed the SEC yet, at the top, at the middle, or at the bottom. But you will notice something. As Colin showed you on that graphic, you'll notice once you got to the bottom, it wasn't like SEC team -2 touchdowns or more. Even with Auburn-Rutgers, the spread was inside a touchdown, which means the depth of the Big Ten is probably improving pretty quickly. Because I think the SEC is still a deep conference. So I think the depth of the Big Ten, there's a lot to be said about that. That's not the story, though. I don't think that's even the argument here. The argument to me, especially early in the season, is not which conference is better. You could talk all day about which conference is better. You know what I care more about is I think there's this switch happening before our eyes early in 2024, and that is the perceptions of the conferences are shifting. Think back in July. If you looked at the SEC back in July, coming out of media days, you probably would have said, I think Georgia's the favorite, but boy, there are like half a dozen teams that could really figure prominently into this conference championship picture. And maybe, depending on how much you believe in LSU or Missouri, you may go even 7 deep or 8 deep. And if Georgia is off their A game a little bit, then it's really game on. And anyone could win this thing. With the Big Ten, what did you say? You probably said Ohio State's going to win it, and if they don't, Oregon's going to win it. And that was the long and short of it. No one gave Penn State a second look. Most people didn't give Michigan a second look. All right, so now we're 1 week, 2 weeks for some into the season, and Georgia has about a 4-point gap in our model against the number 2 team in the country. So Georgia, at least early on, may be elevating a little bit, and maybe we get into a world where they are just the preemptive favorite to win the SEC, and maybe it's still competitive beneath them, but Georgia's the clear favorite. Meanwhile, in the Big Ten, if Ohio State's got trouble on their offensive line, if Oregon, and I think they'll rebound this weekend, but if they don't, if Oregon's got trouble, if they can't run the ball, they got trouble on their offensive line, and Penn State's stock is way up offensively, and USC's stock is way up defensively, and we don't know about Michigan, but we'll see them this weekend, then you could have, instead of in the SEC, you may have a 3 or 4-way dance for the Big Ten championship, or maybe deeper, and no one expected that. So, yeah, we can talk about which conference is better, whatever that means. I care about which one is more interesting, and I care about which one's harder to figure out, and it's still too early, but we could find ourselves by Halloween saying, wow, the Big Ten, I have no clue. The SEC's kind of sorting itself out, because that'll be after Georgia's gone to Alabama and after Georgia's gone to Texas. So we'll know by then what Georgia's made of, or they will have had a chance to validate what they already know they're made of. So that's where I stand on the whole conference debate. Now, Jesse, I'm about to talk about something. You let me know in my ear if we've heard from Comrade Cubelic out there in, where is he? Is he in Dallas? He's in Dallas. He's okay. All right. So we hear positive things in the ear right now about Cubelic. I'm concerned about our little angel. We'll see. Our friends at Quick Trip are fueling us. They should be fueling you if they're not already. Download the app. It's free and it helps you get free stuff. We have been just throwing out free gas cards. And I'm going to continue to do that because they've given me a sizable giveaway budget, which was part of our agreement with them. And it's been wonderful. You know how powerful it makes you feel when anyone does anything you like? You guys show up at College Game Day this weekend and hold up a Pate State sign behind the cameras, or Big Noon, and just free gas on the way, free Chalice of Supremacy on the way. But they are fueling the whole new Saturday tour. We appreciate them so much. This was a partnership that came together as organically as a partnership could ever come together. And we've had a lot of fun with it, and we're only a couple of weeks in. So this will be more fun as the weeks go along. We announce our next tour stop every Sunday night. So like the next show we do, live show, will be Sunday night. I'll tell you where we're going for week 3, and so on and so forth. Okay, let's continue to roll on. Billy Napier at Florida lost week 1, very embarrassing fashion. It has not been a fun time down in Gainesville. The fans are talking. We got this question today from Michael. He said, is it in Billy Napier's best interest to keep starting DJ Lagway at quarterback for the rest of the season to justify what his record may be and any hope of him moving into 2025 and beyond? So what's happening is Graham Mertz is still in concussion protocol. So DJ Lagway came in the game late against Miami. He will start this week against Samford, and that's where we are right now. So the fan base is asking, because it's expected he'll light up Samford. It's expected that'll happen. He'll probably look good this Saturday. Do you just keep him in there, even when Graham Mertz is healthy? I think this is a lose-lose situation for Billy Napier. There's not a lot of winning going on down there right now. I think it's a lose-lose because Graham Mertz started for a reason, because the coaching staff thought he gives the team the best chance to win. DJ Lagway is a true freshman. Now, I'm not blindly saying that coaches never choose the wrong guy. Choosing the right quarterback is very inexact, and sometimes you have a really talented guy come in, and you don't trust him enough to give him the starting job. But then when he goes in, it's fireworks, and it makes you look crazy for not having started him. Yeah, that's happened before. Maybe it happens here. Graham Mertz was starting for a reason. And so Lagway's going to get a shot here, probably do good early. The most workable portion of their schedule is coming up. There's a brick wall down the road, but the most workable portion of their schedule is coming up. So Lagway was your get-out-of-jail-free card. Okay, any coach that's feeling heat knows if you got a talented backup quarterback, that's the last bullet you can fire. And normally when you're in trouble, that's when you fire it. Well, Billy Napier doesn't have that option. He, through a result of an injury, is having to use DJ Lagway now. And if he's good, then you can't bench him once Graham Mertz comes back, because the last thing that people saw with Mertz was you getting destroyed by Miami. So you're not going to bench him. And you're probably done because I don't think Lagway nor Mertz is going to get to the back half of this schedule and save you. Tennessee, Kentucky, Georgia, Texas, LSU, Ole Miss, Florida State. Don't think so. Crazier things have happened, but I don't think that'll happen. But then if he's bad, if Lagway's bad, there's no guarantee you really get a full Graham Mertz back. And then you've probably burned DJ Lagway's confidence early, and you're out still, and then he leaves at the end of the season via the transfer portal, probably. So what you do is you just make the best decision like you did earlier in the year, and you trust your decision, and you let the chips fall where they may. If that means leaving DJ Lagway in, leave him in. If that means playing Graham Mertz the second that the doctors clear him, you play Graham Mertz. But there's a lot of mixing and matching going on down there right now, which is never ideal, especially in year 3. Some of it is by necessity, because when a quarterback gets hurt, you can't have him playing. Okay, Graham Mertz got a concussion. We can't have him in there. I think there's a lot of mixing and matching from a play calling perspective on both sides of the ball happening behind the scenes. So there's a lot that hasn't been figured out fully. That's the bigger issue. Figure the important stuff out, and sometimes the tumblers just fall into place. Don't, and the SEC is no conference to try and find yourself. Tennessee or Georgia or Texas or LSU, those are no opponents to work on things against. At least that's the way I see it. Colin, right before we go to Cubelic, who I assume we have, okay, we have him. Colin, can you tell me if you can do this? Tell me if you can show this tweet from Matt that I sent you earlier today. If you can't, okay, you can. All right, show me this right quick. I just want to encourage people. I got this at 6:23. We went on the air at 7. Matt hit me and said, my son is in 2nd grade. He had show and tell today. He took a printout of Chuggy, who is our new mascot here, and he evidently told his entire class about Pate State. Enough was said that the teacher messaged my wife and I asking where Pate State was located. Proud dad moment, we are Pate State. There is a chalice of supremacy headed towards that young man's doorstep. Now, I couldn't get the kid's address because laws and stuff, but I got the dad's address, I got Matt's address, I talked to him earlier, and a chalice of supremacy is on the way. That's why you can't buy those things. You can earn chalice of supremacy and follow the children. The children have it figured out. Follow the children. And then we're going to do the antithesis of that, and we're going to bring in Cole Cubelic from an airport. Where is Cubelic right now? Is he joining us live from Dallas? You've got the full headset on. You look like you're in air traffic control. What are you doing?
We were delayed leaving Birmingham. Apparently there was an IT failure / shutdown on American Airlines in Birmingham. So we missed our connection here in Dallas. We're going to wait about an hour before we go get another one. The people around me are very annoyed right now. I apologize to them. And there has to be a better way to do this. I mean, I've got like cords. Here are all the cords that I have in the bag. MiFi out. You can see that. Connections for all kind of stuff here. It's a lot.
Right.
But this is what I do for you, regardless of what those people on Twitter say, that it's an embarrassment that I would join you from an airport when I feel like I'm going out of my way to join you from an airport when I told you originally I might not be able to hop on tonight. So you're welcome.
Yeah, congratulations to us all. By the way, have you just considered renting a car? It's a 3-hour drive.
I had and I did, and this the next leg's already delayed. So yeah, if this goes any further back, I'm just gonna go get a car and go. I told the lady, I said, I'll go get a car and drive. She goes, no, you're better off doing this. I said, probably not, but we'll give it one more.
No, dude, take it from someone.
I gotta go on with Pate, and I couldn't do that from a rental car.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, don't do the thing that McAfee has, where everyone's just in a car. Don't do that. No, this looks a whole lot better. It looks classier. So I got up this morning and I was doing some show prep, and I never like to listen to anyone's show, but I turned on you and McElroy this morning, and you guys were talking about the Texas-Michigan game. I texted you. Naturally, you responded an hour later when the context was lost, and you just sent a question mark. The total of this game's in the low 40s. So we were talking earlier tonight. The style of game, I mean, an odds maker is implying like a 25-17 final. That is not typically the kind of game that you consider Texas and Sark being comfortable in. My biggest question about this thing, you can tell me what you think about this. My biggest question is, has that program gotten to a point where it's totally comfortable in just a total fist fight? Because perception is Michigan turns it into that. Well, Michigan's set. Well, I don't know if they can score, but even if they can, what if Texas is kind of secretly more equipped for that than anyone thinks?
I feel like you maybe watched that podcast that I may be on also this week when I talked about the Texas offensive line and how I was a little bit concerned that it was very east to west week one. And I feel like they're a group that has a bunch of veterans and they can be physical. They didn't really go right at that Colorado State defense. Now, some of that is going to be what Sark wants to build and attach around everything that they do. I think physically they can hold up against this Michigan football team. I was impressed with the interior of the defensive line that Texas put out there. We kind of forgot about Bill Norton. We didn't talk enough about him, former Georgia D tackle, been in Arizona for a few years. I thought he had a great game. And it was 4 or 5 guys that rolled in and played fairly well inside for that Texas defense. Now, doesn't mean that just overall they're more physical than Michigan or they're going to push Michigan around, but I think they have better players. I think they're more athletic and faster. So therefore, if you defended Texas well, what are we looking at? 21, 24 points? I don't think there's a chance in hell that Michigan can get to that. Even if the secondary still is porous like it was a year ago, they didn't get tested against Colorado State, so we don't know. And Texas is going to be better rushing off the edge. So I think they could go more quick game, essentially run the ball through the air, extend the run game out to the perimeter. And I'm going to tell you, Josh, I've watched Michigan again on the plane ride here. They looked human. And they looked human in parts where I didn't anticipate that they would look human. The edge defenders were able to get a consistent pass rush. The interior guys got they got pushed around at times, a couple of times, not every time, not consistently. And I will also say this, Fresno State, since you listen to McElroy and I, kind of our adopted sons, our football team that we love to watch play, they're graduating just future bar bouncers year after year. Like, that's the kind of individuals that they have playing on the line of scrimmage. So I was a little disappointed with what I saw inside for Michigan. Now, those guys are still going to be drafted early and they're going to be fine, but I think Texas's defense can be enough. And by default, I think Texas puts up enough points to go win this football game.
Yeah, whoever's running the
But I think I know where you're going, and I do like the under, though.
Yeah, yes,
I do
likewise.
Like
so this whole thing with allegedly not being able to draw anything from week one if you play inferior competition has always been a little suspect to me, although I get it. So I watched Bama finally in its entirety. I assume you did as well. I'm told you do radio in Birmingham every morning. What did you take from a 62-0 win over Western Kentucky? Thoughts compared to what you thought about the team before you saw them play?
Okay, so some of the questions that I had were the secondary, how they would sort of adapt to this vision coverage that Kane Womack was going to employ. It was going to be new. It was going to be different. And I'm actually interested to see. I think that actually could be a better scheme against this sort of Baylor spread up-tempo, push the ball down the field offense that Heupel runs and now Golish is running, because we've seen Nick Saban's defense get caught against that just a little bit. Now, what they won't be, well, they will be against this team, but not later against Tennessee, is physical enough to play fewer numbers inside, stop the run, and then dedicate those defenders outside. This coverage will be different, so I don't think that really matters as much. I wanted to see how the secondary players would sort of adapt to that. If you watched Read and React Monday night, Roman Harper gave a really nice demonstration as how the linebacker play would have reacted to some things under Coach Saban, yet is reacting now under Coach Womack, and it's a little bit more zone principle based. I thought the linebackers looked sleeker, and I don't know if it's going to number 0 or number 11 for Jihad Campbell and for Deontay Lawson, but they looked like they changed their bodies. They looked faster, and the edge defenders was something I had big question marks about. And those guys got to the quarterback. I think you may have found Quay Russo being your guy there for a little while. Quandaris Robinson had a couple of nice wins off the edge. So I feel okay there. And then I think now the only question that really comes out that's left of it is still want to know who the go-to receiver is going to be, because Jeremy Bernard didn't get a lot of targets and we kind of thought it was going to be him. And what's the tackle position going to look like? Because you had Booker out at tackle a little bit in practice this week. You had the pregame injury to Caden Proctor, so that causes the 5-alarm fire. You start scrambling, moving guys around. I want to see if that position is going to be able to solidify. However, one position that you and I have talked about, and I've told people about this, the tight ends blocked very well for Alabama last week. They weren't asked to do a ton of it, but they'll be able to lean on that group to help whoever that is for a little while. So I came away probably more pleasantly surprised with Alabama than I thought I would.
Do you have any scenario in your mind where you think NC State has a legitimately good chance to knock Tennessee off? I painted a couple of them earlier tonight. What's the path if it just outright happens?
The path for that to take place is number one, it's going to take mistakes. And from what I saw from Nico Iamaleava, I don't think you're going to get those mistakes. And this goes back to what you just said. This is a perfect example of it. Don't take Chattanooga and say, what did he do against that team, or against who, as people like to say. Take the actual throws that he made into certain coverages and where the ball placement was on those throws. And that can give you a little bit of a picture moving forward of just how talented this young man is and what he may be capable of doing. And another player that I know you and I have talked about that we saw that kind of proved it, Dylan Sampson, is going to be dynamic. I think they have to have him. The thing is, NC State is a team that will welcome a fist fight. No Dave Doran team is ever going to back down from that. So they have a solid front seven, even losing Peyton Wilson from a year ago. Are they going to be able to play with 3 to 5 in the box, manage the run game, limit those explosive runs, get into some 3rd and longs, and then have extra bodies to take away some of the quick throws, which then negates a little bit of the RPO game? You're going to have to deal with the tight end because I think that position is pretty good for Tennessee this year. Is it likely? No. But it's going to have to be a lot of Grayson McCall, because I still think if you're going to get Tennessee, you have to get them on their back end. And the defensive line's solid. They have maybe the best pass rusher in college football. So is that likely? It is not. You'll need some mistakes. And I just don't know who's going to make it for Tennessee right now. I know it's one game, lower tier competition, but who are we relying on to throw multiple interceptions or fumble multiple footballs? That just doesn't feel like something that's going to happen.
So Florida State goes over to Ireland. They get beat by Georgia Tech. They come home. double-digit favorite. They get beat again outright by Boston College. So everyone looks at that second game, the one we watched Monday night, that's supposed to be the get-right game, and you don't get right. They're saying the same thing about Clemson versus App State. Clemson's offense has been, in my mind, fairly pedestrian for a while, and I think almost it's been glossed over because a majority of the criticism, if Dabo and Clemson get criticism, is it's the transfer portal stuff. It's people don't think that he is using all the talent acquisition means at his disposal, which I agree with. I think that's true. But also, while I think it's totally unfair to say star quarterbacks bailed him out in the past, well, he recruited those guys. So you get credit for that. While I think that's unfair, I do think it's fair that if he's got anything less than a star quarterback lately, that looks really average up there. I was talking to a guy the other day in a world that would know. And he said, Garrett Riley, there was a big deal made when he got hired at Clemson. Behind the scenes, that wasn't viewed as this like overwhelming bombshell game-changing hire. It's been more of the same in terms of result overall up there. So App State's coming in there. It's a big win profile. They went to A&M. They did it last year. They'll be comfortable enough on the road. It wouldn't shock me at all to see that thing single-digit game in the fourth quarter. How do you see it?
I love Clemson's front seven. And if they can find a way to neutralize the stretch play, I think Clemson's defense will be fine in this game. I don't think App will be as balanced as some people believe. And I think if they can find a way to neutralize that play, you stop the bootlegs, the play actions, and you take away some of the deep shots. Going back to your point of quarterback, I think it's totally fair, and I think it's accurate because, let's be honest, whether it was Chad Morris or whether it's Garrett Riley, this is a quarterback-driven system. It's not one that you can usually thrive under without way above average quarterback play. There are some systems that are built for a guy that's maybe not uber talented to just do what the coach is asking them to do, deliver it to playmakers on a regular, consistent basis, and then you can make that offense go that way. I don't think this offense is that. I don't think Cade Klubnik is that guy. I don't think he's an elite college quarterback. Therefore, the skill, be it good, is not elite, and your quarterback is not elite inside that system. How many years have they been telling us the offensive line is going to be better? And it hasn't been. It's pretty much the same year in, year out. So it's not going to be the same test up front that Georgia was. But App State, another team that physicality is not really going to be a problem. I'm anxious to see games like this, Josh, because one of my massive takeaways from week one was there's always been a gap. And I don't know if you saw this or you see it the same way. The gap between the FCS and Power 4, Group of 5, whatever you want to call either one anymore, it is dramatically different than I feel like it has been the last 6 or 7 years. And what I'm wondering, and I don't think we really know just yet, is that going to happen, maybe not to the same extent, but to an extent that the Group of 5 gap is going to now widen to where the Power 4 is pulling away that much further, because we see all these lower tier players going to different schools and having success. Very rarely do we see even average or even below average Power 5 players going down to the Group of 5 or to the FCS. So some of these teams are just continuously having quality players plucked away year after year after year. Hell, we got Alabama and Georgia and Clemson and A&M and Ohio State complaining about not being able to replace that, Josh.
Yeah.
How the hell is App State going to replace that? How is Samford going to replace that? Like, it's literally not possible. So games like this will tell us, I think, we need a pretty big sample size where that gap really is.
Yeah, and it's going to take a while for an odds market to adjust to that. So Adam Lichtenstein, who covers Florida sports, Miami specifically for the Sun Sentinel, he put out a tweet earlier today. He said, Miami continues to grow their football staff. In their media guide, I count 37 off-field personnel. Last year they had 29. In 2022, they had 27. So you and I have talked on the phone about this a lot. I don't know that we've ever talked about it on the show. Everyone knows what the transfer portal does to the top of the G5 and FCS rosters from a player's perspective. Those coaches are doing the same thing. Those coaches, because of the new NCAA rule, are leaving. They've already started. That will exclamate itself fivefold this December when every major Power 2/Power 4 program understands we can go get off-field guys and they can actually now coach on field. So I can go, I'm telling you right now, like I'm standing at a Power 4 practice this spring, and I am having a director of football operations walk me through his coaching roster, and he's saying, yeah, this guy here, he's an off-field analyst. He would have been a position coach at New Mexico State. This guy here, he would have been a coordinator at like Utah State. He's an off-field analyst. So they're not moving in a classical term laterally. They're moving backwards to a significant degree perceptionally, but it's not to those guys. They're doing whatever they can to get on a Power 4 coaching staff before, the ship departs from the dock, and it's impossible to jump from one to the other. So I think what you're seeing, it's still at the early stages of that happening too. Like, that gap only grows wider, which leads us into this whole other conversation about how you've got a playoff system right now that bakes in a guaranteed spot for a G5 just because what? Just because they've got to be baked in. And 2 years from now, when they've got that look-in provision, I think they'll take a long, hard look at that, and I think they hate me for it, but in retrospect, I think our friends in the G5 will regret the day that they poo-pooed the idea of proactively trying to build their own postseason, not subsidized from that Power 5 playoff paycheck, which may not always be there.
Well, let's be real. They're hanging on to mama's boob right now still, because there's a little bit left and they want some of that drip. Okay. And so whatever the wheel or percentage of the slice of the pie is for them right now, if it's $1 billion, $8 billion of revenue coming in, if it's going to be cut all the way down to 2%, 1%, a half of a percent, I would imagine most of those programs, Josh, are looking at that saying, well, that's more than we're going to get doing the other thing. And no one knows what the other thing really is. So until Mark Cuban steps up or Tim Cook steps up and says, we will build you a playoff and we will fortify it with all the finances that you need moving forward for X amount of years, no one's going to take that chance, because they know if it doesn't work, they literally crumble. And then if you start talking about taking away some of these pay games at the same time, by maybe that risk being some of the fallout from that, they're definitely going to be gone. On the portion of your coaching conversation, if people don't understand how that's operating, look no further than Chip Kelly, the head coach in what in our lifetimes has been a destination job. Not saying that it necessarily is right this second, but has been and will be getting similar checks to some of those rarefied air schools that you just mentioned from a media rights perspective moving forward. And he decides to say, no, thank you, sir. I'm going to go over here for less money and less responsibility to assure myself safety moving forward and hopefully have a little bit more fun along the way. So now just go down 4 rungs, 2 rungs, 100 rungs. And that's what all those guys you're talking about are doing, is they're trying to solidify their job security moving forward by being able to have something else or something different in what is a more sustainable model financially moving forward.
I thought what you said, candidly, was one of the top 5 breastfeeding G5 metaphors I've ever heard. Some people in the live chat didn't like it. Do you have anything you want to say?
I don't know what there wasn't to enjoy about it, and I don't know what any human on earth would not understand about it. It seems to be something that is along the lines of natural selection and natural process, but maybe there are aliens listening to the show and we don't know that.
Yeah.
So if that's the case, I don't know how to communicate with them. I don't know what their upbringing was like, or how they were fed, or how they were nourished as infants or baby whatever ends. So that's a them problem, not an us problem. We are humans, and we will speak in human terms and give human examples for the rest of our days.
Pop it out. That's it. You need to go board a flight. I got to get you out of here. You get ornery when you travel. Cube Show. That's the name? It's Cube Show on YouTube?
It might be out there somewhere. I don't know. And it is embarrassing that we had to use photographs this week because I'm an idiot and our video didn't work. But guess what? I think our video did better than all the other last 15 videos we've done.
There you go. So it turns out
there's two ways that we get views. 1, don't put my face on there. 2, have Josh Pate on.
Yeah.
Other than that, it's misery.
Okay, go to Oklahoma. I'll see you later.
Later.
All right. Now, Colin, Jesse, to my knowledge, we've never had a guest in the show and then continued the show, right? Like, we always end the show with it. So we're not done with the show. So we're just going to keep right on going. That's what happened. Cubelic's travel screwed us all up. But I am about to do the segment I've actually looked forward to all night. We got an issue down at Florida State, and it's not just the 0-2 start. It is an issue, but that's not the issue I want to talk to you about. Apparently, the 0-2 start's been bad. Apparently, the in-stadium experience has been just as bad, and the decision-making around Florida State has been just as bad. So I know most of you are not following this. I'm following it for you. You're looking at B-roll right now of what you probably know Florida State home games for. You picture Chief Osceola, you picture the flaming spear in the ground, you picture the tomahawk chop on third down, you picture the war chant, you picture a totally unique and awesome college football experience, which means somewhere out there, there is a nameless, faceless bureaucrat who wants to ruin it. So they took it away. Not totally, but they've taken it away on third downs. Like when I was growing up until like 5 minutes ago, if I'm watching a Florida State game and they get you in 3rd and 7, they're going to pin their ears back. Normally they got high caliber athletes to come after you, but also that crowd is going to be a factor. And it feels like I'm playing against 14 guys on defense. So they've started 0-2. They come home the other day. They get just embarrassed by Boston College, and you have all sorts of people complaining about the on-the-field product, but they're complaining about the off-the-field product too, because apparently the stadium experience sucked, because they have taken that away. They've taken the war chant away, and they just, play music on third downs, which anyone can do. There's nothing unique about that. Now, apparently this happened last year, but no one complained last year because they were winning. Apparently people didn't like it last year even, but they didn't want to complain while they're winning. But once you start losing, then all the Band-Aids get ripped off and everyone's grievances get aired out. And I have not spoken to a single Florida State fan who likes this. I've spoken to like 50 million of you today who dislike this. So we don't have war chant being played on third down anymore because we just have being played instead. And one of two things could be true here. Both of them suck. Either the players asked for it, which is what we've been led to believe. The players made the request last year, which means someone down there was stupid enough to let players, in many cases who were transfers and in and out within 12 months, change a decades-old tradition. Either they were stupid enough to do that, or that's not the way it happened. If that's the way it happened, if you guys, I don't care who it was, I don't need to know who it was. If anyone down there actually signed off on players, many of whom will not be there for more than a calendar year, changing a decades-old tradition for a program that doesn't belong to them. They're not paying for the tickets. They're not the reason that stadium's being renovated again. They haven't shown up year over year. Like it's their team, but it's not their program. It's not their brand. It's the fans. The lacrosse team's working out too, but there's not nearly as much attention on them as there is on football, because people have decided the football team is really entertaining and we love it and we're going to cherish it and we're going to build it up. In return, we create traditions. It's not up to a kid who's 20 years old or an army of them who are 20 years old to come in and vote. No, we're not going to do that thing anymore. And anyone who signed off on that, can you imagine, by the way, whoever's office that was, players come in and say, yeah, the war chant on third down, we don't want it anymore. Okay, whatever you guys say, fire that person, get rid of that person. So it either happened that way, or the alternative is it didn't happen that way, the players didn't ask for it, and somebody we've never even heard of just decided they didn't want the war chant on third down anymore. Because why in the world would we want one of the most intimidating and unique traditions in all of college football? Why would we want to make our stadium deafening and intimidating and make it a spectacle unique unto anything else in the landscape of this sport when we can just make it sound like a gas station parking lot on a Friday night instead? Great. No matter how much you dislike these administrative types, you do not dislike them enough. I promise you, if you could get to know some of these people, because I do, you would dislike them so much more than you do right now, not knowing them. I know many of you work in different environments. I have my fist clenched as I'm talking. A lot of you work in environments that have nothing to do with sports, but you have to deal with these types of people. You love tradition. Tradition is what's great about college football to me. For 98% of the people watching this show, for 98% of the people in the stands at Doak Campbell Stadium, tradition is what draws you to this sport. It's not superior athleticism. If you needed that, you'd just be watching the NFL. You wouldn't be watching college. You watch college because it presents something that nothing else has. It's called tradition. It's called pageantry. That means a million different things to a million different people, but there are a few staples around programs like Florida State, the war chant on third down being one of them. You love that, but not everyone does. And some of them, unfortunately, get put in decision-making positions. You and I love the war chant on third down. They don't. They tolerate it temporarily and hope that maybe we can kind of change it. It's, let me straighten my bow tie. I don't like this. This feels kind of grimy and dirty and raw. you don't belong in a decision-making position in major college athletics. Point blank. So whoever signed off on that, reverse it before the next home game. And then after they reverse it, take the nameplate off their door and kick them to the curb. That's the way that should be handled. The Ramen Noodle Express, powered by FanDuel, as we just abruptly shift gears here, we already had 4 games on here. So Colin is showing you right now. Penn State minus 31.5 has since moved all the way up to 35.5. I think it's 34.5 right now. So we got on that one early. It steamed. We got on Kentucky minus 9.5. That's at 10.5 now. We got on Brigham Young plus 10.5 against SMU. That's a Friday night game. We got on App State plus 17.5. That one's at 17 now. Notice the trend here. You need to jump on these games if you're tailing us early in the week because chances are we'll move the market on them. And even if we're not moving the market ourselves, the market's going to move and we're getting ahead of it. Last night, you have to be following on social as well. Josh Pate CFB on Twitter, at LateKickJosh on Instagram. I put out Oregon minus 18.5. That number is not available anymore. You had to grab it as soon as I put it out. This is a very big audience. When we put the numbers out, enough people bet it, it's not going to last long. I am putting this game out right now. I have not said a word about it until this moment. Tulsa plus 7.5. They're going to Arkansas State. A lot of people expect a bounce back for Arkansas State this week. A lot of people cautious about betting Tulsa. We still think the number's too big. So we're taking Tulsa plus 7.5. Tomorrow night, Friday Night Lines, Instagram Live, After Dark, management not approved, at LateKickJosh over on Instagram. Make sure you're following. That's where I have the model pulled up and I look at the live chat, and for like 20 or 30 minutes, you guys submit your games. I tell you what the model thinks. We compare it to what the current odds market says and what FanDuel says. I tell you what the model would do on it. I tell you if it's a bet for me. Normally, I add at least 2 more best bets during Friday Night Lines. So the card is not completed until Friday Night Lines is completed. Now, I had a little hiccup the other day, and I forgot to post the video. So my vow to you, I will make sure Friday Night Lines stays up in my Instagram feed at least through Saturday morning. Just a little hiccup last week. There's the FanDuel QR code right here on the screen right now. If you go through that portal, it lets them know we sent you. Also, if you just want to type it in, fanduel.com/CFB promotion. They are the exclusive odds provider of the show. All right, I got one more thing to get to because I promised you guys. They're watching us in Anaheim, California, Sugar Land, Texas, and Mount Juliet, Tennessee. I promised you guys something this morning. Colin, in fact, you can start the segment here. I made a mistake the other night. We did our game previews for the week, and I thought we had exhausted all the games we needed to hit, and then you guys said, no, you did not. What is wrong with you? The audacity, the caucasity to leave out Arkansas versus Oklahoma State. Like, what gives you the right? Well, I don't have the right to do that, so here you go. Arkansas versus Oklahoma State. I heard you, and we're going to give you the game breakdown. Oklahoma State is 20-2 at home since 2021. It has the feel. It has all the makings. It's an early kickoff. It's 11 a.m. Central Time out there in Stillwater. I think this game's played in like the 30s to upper 30s, just has shootout written all over. We get Bobby Petrino and Mike Gundy going at it right there near high noon. Wonderful. Arkansas is a 7.5-point dog. The total is in the low 60s. That total will hit 64. That's my guess. So, Taylon Green, quarterback there at Arkansas. They got him from Boise. Most of you who flip through your preview magazines, that's probably what you know about him. Week 1, lit it up against Arkansas Pine Bluff. 16 of 23, 229, 2 touchdowns. He had another 88 on the ground, 2 more touchdowns. This will be the toughest defense, perhaps, that he's just faced. He was playing at Boise before he got here. He's 0-4 versus Power 4 competition. The last 2 times he faced a Power 4 team under 200 yards passing, well, on average, under 200 yards passing, 3 interceptions, didn't run the ball very well. So it's a prove-it game for him, to me. Arkansas lost their left guard last week. They led the SEC last year, by the way, in sacks allowed and tackles for loss allowed. So they're going into an extremely loud environment. I know you guys won't believe this, but the overall noise level in Boone Pickens Stadium, very comparable to a lot of the places Arkansas goes on the road in the SEC. Now, Arkansas's done surprisingly well under Sam Pittman on the road in the SEC. So That's one reason to be confident here. Talon Green's surrounded by better personnel. That's another reason. They've got the roster and talent advantage over Oklahoma State for whatever that's worth to you. Now, as for Oklahoma State, can they make it fundamental? Because if Arkansas State makes it, or if not Arkansas State, if Oklahoma State makes it fundamental here, and by that I mean if Oklahoma State just rides that guy, Ollie Gordon II, behind the most experienced offensive line in college football, then they'll win the game. If they're just popping off 5.5, 6 yards per carry, they'll win the game. Corners are a question for Arkansas. So if they run the ball, if Oklahoma State runs the ball effectively early and they got to load the box, you got a lot of man matchups out wide. Alan Bowman's like 37 years old at quarterback. He'll be able to take advantage of that. They've got good enough wideouts on this team. Linebackers also a question for Arkansas here. So the one thing that I wonder about is we think defensive line is the strength of the Arkansas team. So maybe they stand up against the run a little bit more than Oklahoma State's used to seeing, and maybe you make Alan Bowman throw the ball. Last year, he threw the ball to the other team a lot. It was the thing that they knew they needed to work on. So if I get him in a shootout and he puts the ball in the air more, it gives me more chances to pick him off. I trust Talon Green's just got to have the game of his career here. Bowman had 4 multi-interception games last year. That's a quarter of the games you play. So it's out there. It's out there for Arkansas even maybe to get outgained and still win the game. Arkansas's not bad on the road. They're not bad. I mean, they've lost a lot of close games to much better teams than they are. They lost by like 3 in Tuscaloosa last year. No one even remembers that. Just random close games out of nowhere. Jaquindon Jackson's one of the key players in this game because no one's going to talk about him. He's tailback for Arkansas. I think there is a world maybe where he doesn't outrush Ollie Gordon, maybe he does. But there's a world like if Arkansas wins this thing, that's your player of the game. Jaquindon Jackson, he had about 100 rushing yards against Arkansas Pine Bluff last week. If they win the game, that's probably your player of the game, and he is doing the post-game interview afterwards, and he's talking about how everyone talked about Ollie Gordon, and I saw this as a stage to make my mark. You try and envision these sorts of things. That's how it could play out. Colin, let's take a look at what the model thinks. FanDuel right now, Oklahoma State -7. The model nearly agrees across the board. Model has Oklahoma State -7. I think that in a game I expect to be played in the mid-30s, upper 30s, that kind of game, if I have that kind of game happening and you're giving me anything over a touchdown, I'm willing to take Oklahoma State to win the game outright. I will take Arkansas plus the points, so I'll split the difference there. Cowboys win a close game, 1-possession game. Give me Arkansas plus the points. We are off to Ann Arbor tomorrow. It is going to be an incredible Saturday. And remember, as you guys found out last week, when we go on the road, we go on the road. And I'm not doing a big, huge production pregame show. We leave it to the big networks to do that. I get down in the trenches for you. I take the iJosh, I charge it up, and I give you as much behind-the-scenes access as I possibly can. The things you can't see on TV. That's what I aim to show you. And so we did it last week in the Swamp. I'll do it this week in the Big House. Many of you have never been there. It's an incredible venue. It's like 500 years old. I think gladiators fought there at one time. It's awesome. There's one access tunnel for both teams. You can get a little chippy in there at times. Well, I mean, we coughed that Ohio State-Michigan dust up 3 years ago and then had to give it to Fox free. And good for me, by the way, for doing that. So there's no telling what you can see. Make sure you're following. The Instagram story is very lively on Saturday. Not to mention Friday Night Lines the night before at Late Kick Josh. We got to get out of here. Okay, you're free to go enjoy your NFL now. Just make sure you subscribe to the channel and tell 5 of your friends to do the same. You've been doing it all week because our numbers are insane this week. For producer Jesse, for director Colin, I'm Josh Pate. Enjoy the weekend. We'll be here to react to it all Sunday night. Until then, take care and God bless.